Hi Flosstube, I'm Sarah, the Can-Am Stitcher. Welcome to my Flosstube number 8. Thank you to all of you that are visiting for the first time and to all of my returning viewers. I really appreciate it. I am really grateful for all of the kind comments and encouragement that I've received from everyone. Thank you very, very much. So I did not film last week to give an update on my focus project for the previous week. I was feeling a little under the weather from the heat. I wasn't sick or anything, it was just the weather had drained me, and I was starting to feel a little bit nauseous after running a few errands and going in and out from air-conditioned buildings into the hot weather and then back and forth. So I just opted not to do a video last week and just participate in some self-care. So I will give an update on my focus piece that I had for the week of June 13th, and I selected to focus on my temperature tree, and I got it caught up all the way up to June 19th because that was the week, of course, the full week. So here is my tree up to June 19th. You'll notice the change in the colors as we're getting up to the top, and for those of you that saw previous videos know that I live in New Mexico and we had a lot of hot weather that had come in the past couple of weeks. So I'm just going to refer to the chart to give you an idea. So we were in the 90s, and we are anywhere from the low to high 90s, as well as we hit some days over 100 degrees. So that's why you see that nice change all the way up to the reds. So today though is a beautiful day because the temperature is in the 70s. We're expecting some thunderstorms and potential rain. We have a flash flood warning for today. I did hear some thunder a little while ago, so it'll be interesting to see if we get any thunder while I am filming this. So this is my folder where I keep all the information and the pattern for the temperature tree. I log all the temperatures, and I keep it in this bag along with all the floss, and this is my little temperature chart. And what that means is it's identifying which floss I'm using for which temperature range. So this will go on the back of the frame once this temperature tree is finished, so that there's that reference point moving forward. So that was my focus piece for that week. And then in this past week, from the 20th until yesterday, my focus piece was something from the May Mania challenge that my sister and I had, and it was called Blooming Sunflowers. So that came from this book. This is the project here. We had 5 projects for May Mania that we worked on, one project each. We started a new project each weekend in May. And so that was my focus. I wanted to see how much I could finish on that because I hadn't quite finished it in May. It took a lot of work. It was on here, let me have the information here. So Blooming Sunflowers is the name of the pattern. It's for Blackbird Designs, and it's in the book called Winds of Autumn. The designer is Barb Adams. The stitch count for the project is 71 wide by 66 high. I used a 36 count natural linen swagart. I used a John James needle. I started the project on the 23rd of May. And the last stitch was yesterday. And in addition to the last stitch, I FFO'd it. I used all of the called for DMC colors that were converted from other options presented in the book. And so I'm going to give you a pictorial tutorial on how I finished the project, and then I will show you the finished project. So what I did first of all was after I finished stitching it, I took the piece and I pressed the front and the back to try and get rid of any of the worst creases. It was a project that I worked on, I stitched in hand on. I didn't use any hoops, but there were still creases from rolling it and manhandling it, yeah, as I'm sure some of you do with some of your projects. Then I flipped the project over and I used a friction pen to mark out the size of the project that I would cut it to. So I measured it, marked it with the friction pen, and then realized I added too much to the top line, so then I resized and drew the correct line. Next, I took some lightweight interfacing I had and cut it to size, placed it onto the back, and then pressed it onto the back of my finished piece. This was not a step that was called for in the instructions in the booklet. This is something I did because I wanted to just add some stability to it. And of course, because I was winging it and didn't know if that would be appropriate, it was a chance I was taking, so I did that. And you'll notice in the photo that the friction marks completely disappeared when I pressed it out. And I've been very happy with using friction pens. I had felt some trepidation when I first used them with some quilting projects, and then as soon as I saw how wonderful they worked and how they never failed me, I've used them, and I have them in a variety of colors so that depending on what color fabric I'm using, I can see it. So I did that. Next thing I did was I trimmed the piece to the correct size, and here's a shot of the front and back of that. And then what I did was I took my cut piece, I measured it to ensure that I had accurate measures or measurements, and then what I did was I cut out a piece for the back, and then I cut out 2 lining pieces. And I was really fortunate because I went through my quilting fabric stash and found found a piece of fabric that I thought would work really well for the lining as well as for the back. I did a lot of auditioning of fabric for the back and then settled on this blue just because of the blue that's in the cross-stitched piece itself. So I got those pieces out, and while I was doing all of this, I looked over because I could hear a little bit of movement from my dog, Ginger, who I showed in my last video, and she was over to my left and sleeping in her yoga positions. And so once in a while, she kind of flips over and stretches and does another position. So here are a couple of shots of her yoga positions that she had while she was sleeping while I was working on these projects. And for anyone who might notice, there are some marks. There's a mark on my wall and on that window ledge, and that's not from Ginger. She's never done anything like that. That was from a dog that I lost last year. His name was Chet, and he unfortunately would become a little too rambunctious sometimes when he was watching out that window to the park that's behind my house, and scratched it, and I haven't repaired it. I need to get to that. Anyway, I have digressed a little. So then the next thing I did was I took my pieces, I sewed a lining to the top, to the right side of the top of the cross-stitched piece. And I did the same thing with the other piece of lining and sewed it to the right side top of the backing piece. And for both of those, I used a 1/4 inch stitch. I then took both those pieces and I pressed open the seams because I wanted to kind of eliminate some of the bulk. And I had debated using the quilting approach, but I thought, no, let's just go with some open seams. There were no instructions about the seams in the finishing instructions from the book, so that was just my own choice to do that. Next, I placed the two pieces right sides together and secured using some clips. I I make a decision between clips and pins depending on a project and depending on what I'm doing in the project. So some projects I use both. I marked a 3-inch opening on both sides of the piece. You can see that I used a friction pen again. From there, then I sewed the pieces together using a 1/4-inch seam, and of course leaving the openings. Here's a couple of examples showing my working on my machine, sewing them. My poor machine has not had much use in the past year other than for making masks. I did end up losing my mojo for quilting. I'm starting to feel it coming back, so I'm hoping that these little projects that require use of my sewing machine will reignite my love of quilting and sewing in general. I'd like to get back to sewing some clothing, maybe some pillows and other items. Anyway, so I took the piece, I then pressed it, I trimmed the corners because I wanted to be certain that once I'd flipped it inside out that I didn't have that bulk that you get at the corners if you don't trim it up. And just because I like to take those little extra steps of precaution, I applied a little fray check at each of the corners that I had trimmed. Probably a little too cautious on some things, and I'm confident it causes me a little extra grief than it needs to. Then I turned the project right side out, gave another little press. And when I did that, I realized that I was going to have some issues with the opening because the instructions within the book didn't adequately address how the opening would prevent fraying once you had inserted and had a ribbon or some kind of tie for the top of the bag. So then I flipped it back and inside out, put a lot of thought into what I was going to do to try and resolve that, and realized that I had some, I think it was a 1/4 inch, maybe not even a 1/4 inch. Let me see. I have it here. No, about 1/8 of an inch of double-sided sewing tape. So I used that and applied that onto those seams that were at the opening. Applied those, pressed them nice and tight, and then flipped the project right side out again. Pressed it after I did that, and then I also, after I pressed it, I then inserted the lining into the bag and gave another good press. From there, what I did was I stitched 1 inch from the top on both the back and the front. I used a longer sized stitch so that I just like the finished look better with that longer stitch. Then I stitched 3/8 of an inch from the top on the front and the back using the same type of stitch. I did back stitch both, and so now that created a casing for the bag's tie or ribbon. So I went searching through all of my supplies, looking and trying to decide what would be an appropriate option. Based on what I had some blue ribbons, so I used that. I cut 2 pieces based on the called for size, inserted them using a yarn needle. Let me look for it. A yarn needle has been a godsend. I've used them for masks and so many other things. So here's one of the 2 sizes that I have. So I used that to insert the ribbon through the casing. I applied some fray check on the ends of the ribbon, tied the ribbons together on each side, and here is my bag. I'm really happy with it. Here's the back. I can give you a little closer view so you can see the stitching. Here is the inside, and I'm really happy. I'm very, very, very happy with it. I have a couple of ideas on how I'm going to use this bag. I am giving a lot of thought on my other 2 mania projects that I still need to finish that came from that same book. I might turn one of them into a bag as well. One of the things I did do, you'll notice, is I did put an S for Sarah. In the pattern, it had B for Barb Adams. That's the name of the designer. So I was just very happy with this. It's stitched on a 36 count. So for those of you that this is your first viewing of any of my videos, Mania Challenge, one of the things I did was I chose to work on some 36 count projects. I'd never worked on 36 count until May, so it was a new stretch for me, and I really enjoyed it. I love the way these colors turned out, and I'm always thrilled when I work with colors. I'm like, oh, I don't know if those are my colors, but then I really love them. I love pink and blue, so to be loving this kind of a, I don't know if it would be like a mustard seed color and some of these different browns and hazelnut colors, I just think they work really well together. It was really beautiful. So for May Mania, that means I have, out of the 5 projects, I have 3 that have been fully FFO'd. The first one was this one. My second one was this drum. I'd never done a drum before, so. And this other one was my first cross-stitch pin cushion, and of course my bag. So I'm really, really happy with that. And so I finished it last night, and I was chatting with my sister, and she's like, oh, so what are you going to start? Are you going to start something new, which can be a focus piece for Sunday? And I'm like, I don't know, but I did decide that I would relent and finally start a new project in June, which I had not done. Of course, it's almost the end of June, but I did start a new project. So the new project is this one, Quaker du Noel. It's a Jardin Prive, and the designer is Natalie Chichon, I'm not sure, and I feel terrible that I am mispronouncing her name. Anyway, I'm stitching it on a 32 count, so I'm doing 2 over 2. The sample that's in the photo was stitched over 1 on 36. So I'm doing that, and the floss that I am using, here's the bag for this project. The floss that I am using is Classic Colorworks Manor Red, and I selected that because it is going to go into my loft space, which is where I have my Christmas tree every year, and I selected colors from the rug that I have in that space along with some of the art. So that's the inspiration for the color, and this is the progress that I made last night. So I'm happy with that. I think it's looking very nice. What I have not done though is decide what my focus piece will be for the rest of this month, starting today. I'm not sure if I want to do one of my 2 remaining Mania projects, or if I'll spend the next few days working a little more on my temperature tree to get caught up on that. I will decide at some point today. So let's see, that was a lot of information that I've shared. Giving a lot of thought to this, I'm not sure which. Anyway, I will decide by the end of today. I wanted to give some shout outs to some other Flosstubers. So one of them I'd like to shout out is someone that my sister turned me on to, and they're called, she's called Mad Morti, and actually you'll notice if you go and visit their YouTube that it's husband and wife, and they're just fun, they're very sweet. I really like the interaction between them. I think they have a really wonderful chemistry together, and I just really enjoy watching the 2 of them. I find them endearing, I really do. The next one I want to call out was someone who found because she had subscribed to me, Nonna Sue Stitches. She's very new. She only has, I think, 3 floss tubes out right now. And one of the things that I thought was really, really wonderful was her very first floss tube was a very short one, 5 minutes long. But she made a call out to the community asking if they could help her find a pattern that she was looking for. It was something she'd had before and had since lost, and it was sentimental value. So she put a call out to the community and asked if anyone could find the pattern for her. And so when I went to her second floss tube, I did find out that the community answered the call and found the pattern for her. So yay to our floss tube community. That's one of the things I really enjoy about it. In addition to the exposure to other new patterns, new approaches, new people, etc. So the other person I'd like to call out is someone who I just stumbled across recently called Javagirl Stitches. Oh my gosh, I watched one of her recent videos and she was showing a lot of different finishes that she has done and talking about them. And it was really, I really enjoyed it because she gave me some additional ideas on finishes for future projects. And actually, maybe I might rethink what I'll do with these 2 Mania ones that will be finished soon. I like to be able to take my projects and have them finished in some way, either that's in a useful way or some way I could present. So she's got great ideas, so check her out. Of course, I want to call out my sister, Victoria, the happy stitching nurse. She is a wonderful sister, and I really appreciate all the kind things she says about me all the time. She makes me cry. And I also want to call out XrossStitch. He's a lot of fun. He's very sweet. I love his accent. Oh my gosh. He has the sweetest southern accent and reminds me of a dear friend of mine who has a very similar accent. I think they actually may be from the same state. And I want to say thank you to XrossStitch for the call out that he gave to my sister during the week. She really needed it, especially on a day when it had been very rough for her. She'd had a rough hospice case that she'd had to deal with. So thank you, XrossStitch, for that. Other than that, that's it. I hope everyone has a great stitching week. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to consider doing videos every 2 weeks instead of every week. I don't want people to feel like I'm inundating them with videos, and maybe keep it to 2 weeks. It's not that it's too stressful or anything. I just don't want people to feel like they're seeing my face too much. Anyway, have a great stitching week, everyone, and see you in 2 weeks. Bye.